Hello, is there anybody there? I'm a little bit early. Hello, is there anybody there? Hi, I must be live. Yes. Hi, Louise. Hi, Debbie. Yep. I'm sure they'll be on catch up. Hi, Karen. Hi, Jessie. I'm a bit sniffy today. Sorry, got earache. A bit stuffed up. It's a damp day here in Scotland, just for a change. It seems very dark. Can you see me okay, or is it my screen? Let me know if it's dark. I could maybe put a light on. I don't know if that would help. Of course, it might just be what I'm seeing. Does that help? You'll be seeing that I'm sitting surrounded by boxes because I've just moved house. Thanks, Jessie. You too. I better not start to my allocated time. Do feel free to ask questions. I can. Last time I did it on my phone because the internet connection was so bad, but I've managed to get my laptop tethered today, um, so I can read the questions really easily as I go. Obviously, if you're not live, I can't answer the questions unless you fling them in now, Debbie. I'll try not to sniff through this. Where is everybody that's watching? Are we in the UK? So I know I can see Jessie's not. Jessie's in Germany. Is there anybody's message I can't see? No. Ooh, what does that mean, Jessie? Is that a place? Is that where you are? Hey, Kilsyth, Louise. I don't think I knew you lived in Kilsyth. Hello, down under, Andrina. That's my favourite German word. My pronunciation isn't good. I'm not going to try it live. Hi, Jackie. Hi, Karen and Aber. Hope it's warmer with you than it is here today. Hello in Aberdeen, Michelle. Hi, Linda. Bosie's away. He's gone to lie down with his chew. So it's silent here. Hopefully we'll not be disturbed. Bosie's bad behaviour. Hope his brother's behaving, Linda. 2 minutes to go. Ruby's not appeared to tell me to hurry up like she did last time. I'll wait for 2 minutes. Better do as I'm told. For those that just joined us, do feel free to ask questions as we go along. Roasty toasty. Send some down to Ayrshire. It's chilly here and damp. Oh. Extreme motivation sounds good, Linda. I'm all for extreme motivation. Means you don't have to work so hard. Okay, it's 1 and I think I can start. So I'm going to talk for the next hour about teaching heel work. I always say it's just another trick, and it is just another trick, but it's probably the hardest trick of all because it has so many components in it that you want to teach these components or building blocks so that when you actually start out with the dog close to you, it knows its job really before you've even put the dog on your leg. So I'll start by telling you about my first heel work dog that I did obedience with, and he was amazing, absolutely amazing in class because all we ever did was lure the dog around with food. When I took him to his first show, he was far from amazing. He was like, no food, no heel work. So he wasn't good at his first show. So from him, back in the, oh my goodness, the 80s probably, I decided that I wouldn't teach my dogs using food as a lure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that very soon. But I want to break the talk up a little bit. So I'm going to talk about foundations and relationship. And in that we'll talk about food. I'm then going to move on and talk about foundations and body awareness, and into which I've tagged along Cavaletti, which is a kind of body awareness. Then I'm going to talk about actually starting to move with the dog on the out. So with your hand, I don't think the camera's big enough. If I sit back from it, I can probably show you my hands as we go. With your hand right out. I can't go far enough out because I'm against the wall. So getting the dog to move along on the out. Then I'm going to talk about statics, which I think most people start with, but I don't start with because it's fiddly and boring for the dog, and you want to generate a bit of motivation before you start on statics. And then finally, I'll need to get a move on, won't I, to get all this in an hour. The whole picture, putting it all together. So it's, as you can see, lots of components that are going to fit together to give you wonderful heel work. What happens if you don't? I mean, the early classes I went to, obedience classes, the dog follows the foot and it follows the foot on your leg. What tends to happen with dogs like that lack body awareness is that they scuffle their bottom down because they bring their head up and they have very little, I think it looks very untidy, I don't like to see it, but then you see dogs in the UK in the top obedience classes who scuffle around with their bum, they almost sit as they do turns, particularly left turns. It's not a look I like. So we're going to start with looking at foundations, and the biggest foundation of all, whether your dog is a little puppy or whether your dog's an older dog, is getting some kind of relationship with the dog. So most people think by that I mean get the dog to play tuggy and get overexcited. And I don't think that's necessary at all. Yeah, it's nice if your dog will play tuggy, but you want to look at the reward for the dog that suits the dog. So most people would probably say that one of the most drivey dogs I've worked in Heelwork to Music was Maddie, who won Crufts 3 times. And I think always looked drivey. She was very driving, really, really keen. But Maddie never, ever played tuggy to get that. If I had did a lot of playing tuggy with her, it's guaranteed she would have been a barking dog, because she was prone to making noise. So I don't think play or play with a tuggy, which is what you traditionally see, walk around an obedience show or even a Heelwork to Music show, and you'll see people hyping their dogs up with tuggy. I don't think it's necessary that your dog has to play tuggy to be motivated. There are other ways to motivate a dog. It was, for example, with my Bichon, anything involving a whippet stick as a reward. Or digging. She liked digging as a reward. So the training field we worked in a lot was full of dug up little bits where she particularly dug on molehills, I have to say. A bit of heel work, and then she went for the click happened and then she went for a dig. So I don't think play is hugely important. My first beardie that I worked in Heelwork to Music, she was a dog that I did agility with and then transitioned into doing a little bit of obedience and quite a lot of Heelwork to Music with. But she was a dog that not interested in playing, yet she was so drivey, so fast in agility. Yet she would happily churn out motivated heel work for food. So what I'm saying is look for something the dog likes to interact with you with. And that doesn't have to be hanging on the end of a tuggy, because for some dogs that creates scuffling, lack of body awareness, and worse still, barking. Don't like barking. I have beardies and they can do that without any help from me. So I'm just going to look at the questions before I move on, if there is any. Hi Dawn, nope. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So play, yeah, it might be important, but what I'm saying is it isn't the only thing. Look at what your dog really likes to do. If it likes digging holes, dig holes. If the dog likes food, use food, but don't use food to lure, and I'm going to come back to that. Use food after the click. Don't have it in your hands all the time. Food, I've kind of mentioned. I'm not a fan of using food. I'm going to talk about why not and how not to as we go on. Food's fine as a reward, but it should happen after the click. Perhaps I should say a little bit about how I use the click, because I know other people don't use the clicker in the same way. If my dog touches my hand and I click, it's perfectly acceptable for the dog to go and get the food or the toy or whatever it is on the other side of the room, or to go and dig over in that corner. So the reward doesn't have to be delivered in situ for what the dog was clicked for. I think that's really important because the click marks the behaviour, but it ends the behaviour. And from that, you'll acquire a great deal of motivation anyway. Rather than holding the dog in position, I think you lose motivation by doing that. Also, it's not necessary. And if you're a shaper, which is not, well, I will talk a little bit about shaping soon, but it's not the most important skill set for teaching heel work. It is for freestyle though. But if you're a shaper, your dog will understand what it's clicked for, and the reward can happen anywhere. Because the reward can happen, well, I always forget how many seconds later. The principle's temporal contiguity. But you've got quite a long time. I mean, I could probably run out into my hole, run out into the front, into my van and get a treat and reward the dog. And still, I would be in that window where the dog would associate with the reward. So the behaviour with the reward. So I think that's important for generating motivation as well, how you use that click. Don't hold the dog in position all the time. So food, that's kind of food. I don't want to say any more about food. So relationships important. The other thing I would say about that is, get down on the floor, be level with the dog. Don't always lean over the dog, even if you're teaching heel work, particularly if you're teaching a small dog. I taught Dinky a lot. I should say lots about small dogs. I taught Dinky a lot on a grooming table, on the walls, at the beach. So I was constantly elevating her height, either that or crawling around on my creaky knees. Foundations, drive, energy and play. I mean, I've mentioned quite a few of them, and obviously drive's important. And energy, and I think it was Linda that said handle his extreme motivation. There are those dogs who are what would you say, they're naturally motivated. I don't know I don't know Bosie's brother really, really well, but if he's anything like Bosie, yeah, they have that motivation in abundance. You don't have to put too much into it to get that energy. For some dogs, you need to put a lot more in. They are dogs that I would look at using perhaps a lot of play with, so long as they weren't on the barky side of things. Or I might use the whippet with, which is I used a lot with Dinky. The whippet is a lure toy with a toy on the end, so it moves. So most dogs like the movement rather than, well, they like the movement better than when they get it, because then they kill it and it dies. It's not so interesting. So that was hugely motivating for her. So creating that energy is really important. One of the classes I used to take, oh my goodness, it must be going back maybe 14 years. I was doing a lot of it when I did a lot of it with Maddie. So she would have been 15 this year. So was called Heelwork is Like Snooker, and I used a lot of send away to motivate her. So for example, there might be a cone at the other end of our training field, send her round it, and when she went round it, I would kind of move away, didn't even have to run, and have my hand out, and she would come and target my hand on the move or statically, depending on what we were working on. So I used to do a lot of, and that's a very basic description like snooker was. It basically, I was thinking of, send the ball out, it rebounded, and my hand was the pocket. So I used a lot of games around that to generate motivation with a dog that didn't really tug and also had oodles of energy. I haven't done it so much didn't do it with Dinky, she's not that kind of dog. Again, it's about knowing the dog you're working with. If you've got a dog with high energy like Bosie and like Linda's describing her boy, then yes, that's the way to go. Something along the lines of Heelwork is Like Snooker. I'm just scrolling down here. Hello, Susan. Michelle, you have a beardy border and she loves to bark. Yes, barking is a nuisance, and dogs that love heel work. One of my first heel work dogs, Polly, she was my first beardy bitch. She was, oh my goodness, she was the worst barker ever. And first obedience show I took her to, she barked her whole heel round. She did it beautifully, but she barked. So again, with those barkers, one thing you can do, I did with Polly and I also did with Gertie and Bonnie, was teach them to bark, teach them to quiet. so that you have a bit of control over that barking should you need to control it. And it's also fun, because what I don't like to see with dogs that bark is you see the owner going shh or quiet or whatever the cue is, and then the dog goes, oh, I don't like it. So it has to be that you reward the bark, you reward the quiet, so that the dog, you value both behaviours, even if you don't particularly value the barking. So teaching the dog to be quiet is one way with the barking dogs, and also not doing too much of the arousing stuff. Perhaps the whippet might be too much, depends how you use that. Um, you probably don't want to do excesses of tugging. You might want to slowly feed a dog as reward, or use something like a scent game as a reward. If the dog's very foody, having what's it called, a mat, a snuffle mat around and putting food in it. So you go click when you've got what you wanted, and then let the dog go and calm down a little bit before you start again. Anything to stop barking. I've said Heelwork's like sessions. And so body awareness is a huge foundation. So I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, dogs that did their heel work with their bottoms almost on the ground, particularly in turns. So I'm sure you can picture that if you're a show or even a heel worked music show, you often see dogs that do that. One of the reasons they do that is people ask sit, particularly on a halt, a lot. And in recent years, I just never ask my dogs to sit. One reason is because it's pretty not so useful for heel worked music. Stands far more useful. The other reason is that dogs stand more naturally than they sit. And also it inhibits this. I scuffle my bum because I'm anticipating you're going to ask me to sit and stop. And what lots of people do on those sit and stops, particularly in obedience classes that I've watched, I hope nobody knows who I'm referring to, is that they feed the dog on the stop rather than feed the dog on the move. So the dogs are desperate to sit because that's where the reward comes, the tuggy or the food or whatever. So stand is more useful. It inhibits that scuffling bottom, but stand is also, it's natural for the dog, and it's your first body awareness exercise, because I use stand at the beginning of cavaletti. You can tell if your dog's not quite right if it's standing, if it's not distributing its weight correctly between its four legs. Stands a much more useful foundation, and it's the beginning of this body awareness, and it's better for heel work to music if anybody does heel work to music, and they do. There's a few people. So stand is that first thing I would teach the dog. Then the most important thing is the hand target. I did do a video for a charity over the first lockdown we had here, and it's on YouTube now. I would do more, but I'm not very good technically, so don't expect it to be, all singing, all dancing. It's a very basic video, but the hand touch is covered on it. I can't remember in how much detail. The important thing is having a really solid hand touch, and this is something you can do with a new dog. It's just a bit of a game, and I usually sit on the floor, throw some food out, and then when the dog comes back, I have my thumb tucked under. I've changed what I did with my hands in recent years, and found this really useful. So I have bring my thumb underneath, and even just sitting like this in the early stages, dog comes back and targets under here is because I'm always prepared to lure 2 or 3 times, and actually by moving that by changing the position of my thumb slightly, I can manipulate the dog's head position occasionally. So if the dog's slightly, because one misconception people have about heel work is that the dog should be looking at you. The dog shouldn't be looking at you. The dog's body should be straight, as in that stand that we've just discussed. But obviously it'll bring its head up your leg. So the dog's not turning its head round to look up at you. So straight ahead, which you probably got from teaching that stand, but later on I'll talk about what to do with this thumb. But let's stick with the basic hand target. We threw the foot out, the dog's come back, it's targeting on your hand. So you're after increasing. I think the biggest mistake people make, particularly clicker trainers, is that they don't increase the duration on the hand quickly enough. So they click, the dog comes, click, the dog comes, click. So the dog's learning focused on the hand. You want the dog to learn to stay focused on the hand. So you need to accept that mistakes will happen. We all learn from mistakes, and dogs are no different to us. So if the dog comes back, you don't click and then it moves away, so what? When the dog comes back the next time, just click a little tiny fraction clicker. So it might look like click straight away, moved away, no click, hey, that happens, click and reward. So you're starting to build up that tiny brain till the dog really will glue to your hand. Now you do get some dogs who do almost like this Scottish word, dunt on your hand, and that's okay. I kind of call it the demanding dunt, because the dog's like, give me the click, give me the reward. So I'd quite happily reward click, so that the dogs learn it. Eventually that just leads to, hey, I get clicked at that point, not that point, so I will glue my nose to your hand. Does that make sense? Let's see if there's any question. My youngster is very driven and herding, obviously not sheep, but the ball is a substitute chase. Yeah, you can use that as a reward. I use all kinds of things as reward, and what you're describing is kind of like a snooker thing, send the dog away to, chase. All I was doing to go around, not dissimilar to herding, because dog away to balance on a bin of sheep. So, it's just send away, it's running, it's using the dog's energy to create motivation. It says see more, hang on. Not driving and training. Again, I think it's about, sometimes we're not willing to go back to basics. Sometimes it's really worth going back to basics. And even if that basic is just getting that solid hand target, you'll quickly generate motivation, because with things like teaching the hand target, for example, because it's what we're just talking about, you're got a high degree of reward, so the dog will enjoy it because the rewards should be rapidly coming. If they're not rapidly coming in the early stages, you're not giving the dog enough feedback and that it's doing well. Good afternoon, Suzanne. You may have heard all this already. Okay, so hand touch, really, really important. And again, I'm not doing this yet. Oops. I keep forgetting I'm back to front here. This, I'm sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. Very lazy training. Great winter training as we come into summer. Maybe not for those of you in Australia. So the other things that I've done a lot of is, now I was kind of inspired by Casey Cover many years ago. A friend gave me her Sinalia Sats Bridge and Target manual, and it's all about targeting, and I took a great deal from that. I started doing things like, if you know her, she's done a lot with zoo animals and rescue animals, and I did a lot of, particularly I did a lot of body targeting. I've done quite a bit with Bosie as well. So one I teach quite quickly is shoulder targeting. So the dog's understanding putting its shoulder against something. Doesn't have to be your leg. I use fly swats, so the dog targets against those. I use my hands, so the dog will target against them. But there are some really simple body awareness tricks you can use. So most of us, particularly those who do things like Parker or Heelwork to music, will have their dogs putting their front feet on a raised podium of some kind, table. you can use that to teach the dog to pivot its body so as its shoulder. Now, I wouldn't be saying close or heel at that point. I would just be marking the fact that the dog was pivoting onto my leg, pivoting onto my leg, pivoting onto my leg. So it's learning about its shoulder placement in relation to my leg in a really informal way. I mean, very often I'd be clicking the movement into that because I'd be looking for a dog that could pivot like a. I hate saying this because circuses are horrible and they're banned in Scotland anyway. Like a elephant pivoting on a drum at a circus. So it's that trick's good for heel work to music, but it's really good for obedience because you're in the movement part of that, forget the shoulder placement now, you're teaching the dog to pivot its bottom in, and that's a really useful skill for obedience, because even if you up the classes towards novice in obedience, you see dogs that have very limited rear end awareness, and when they're asked to do a left turn, because obviously obedience is on the left side, the dog's bottom doesn't pivot in very well. It just kind of follows the rest of the dog. So clearly the dog doesn't have that rear end awareness. So I think it's really worth teaching pivot if you're going to do heel work to music. I think if you're going to do obedience, teach the dog on both sides anyway, because you get a balanced dog. So pivot in both ways. Two things you get from that. You get this bump on your leg with the dog's shoulder. I use cable drums, so you can actually stick your feet underneath them, so that stops them moving, but also it probably roughly the right part of your leg that the dog's bumping onto, or the right part of the dog's shoulder is the important thing, not your leg. So you've got, from that simple pivot trick, you've got the bump on your leg, and you've also got this, I can move my bottom in, so that when you start to put the dog on your leg, your left turns will look super. So the other trick I would do, just while we're thinking of using the dais, I would also use the dais. Oh, one thing I should say about the dais is start high, it's easy, then lower the dais. So later on, when the dog's confidently pivoting, I would use something like, like a cushion that's slightly bouncy, mainly because it's low, not because it's soft, so that you're starting to get a more natural behaviour and you're eliminating the height, which makes it easier obviously for the dog. So the other pivot trick I would teach is with the dog's back legs on the dais and its front legs on the ground. So the pivot, this one is about the opposite of the other one, because it's about teaching the dog to control its rear end as well while it moves its front end. And what you don't want, I think you see this more in heel work to music than obedience, is a dog that when you start to do, for example, a left turn, actually almost starts to reverse round about you. It's quite a nice way to teach reverse roundabout you, because that's what I did with my Bichon. I just extended the trick she already knew till she reverse roundabout me. But it's not what you want for heel work. You want control so that the dog isn't reversing round about you. It's actually stopping and it's keeping its bottom kind of in line with yours as you turn to the left or the right. So, what have I said? Shoulders and pivoting. Any questions so far before I move on? Finding it hard to get Obi to see throwing food, even right under his nose. Yeah, I didn't mention food run. Food run or toy run, that's a motivating reward in itself. So you throw out the food, the dog comes back, and it's a circuit of go get it, come back, go get it, come back. To which I very often add, a bit like when I mentioned the heel work is like snooker, go get it, I'm now going to walk away and can you come and target on my hand? So, yep, that's a really good motivating. Seeing the food, I'm not sure what surface you're working on. If it's grass, try cheese. Be generous, so quite big bits, not tiny bits he's never going to see. You could try ball run if he's good at I usually with ball run, throw the ball out, face the dog, get the dog to come through my legs and drop the ball before I throw the next ball. So the ball's with me. The other reason I do that, for those of you who maybe do obedience, is because that's how I initially teach my dumbbell. And I never want the dumbbell dropped in front of me, only ever behind me. So it's, go get the ball, go get the dumbbell, and yeah, you can come back through my legs and dump it behind me, but don't dump it in front of me. So you could try ball run, big pieces of cheese on grass or something else that would show up, depending on the surface. Any idea? Stop being a numpty. The focus isn't great. Doesn't seem to be, okay, even though he is foodie. Yeah, with a really foodie dog, just to go back to the hand targeting, what I then start doing is, so we've got the hand shape. Oops. My other hand's going to appear there, isn't it? Very confusing. I'm seeing me back to front. So the foot's not here. So it might have been here once or twice, 3 times at the most. But eventually the foot's not here and the dog comes back. Quickly I introduce, in this hand is a fist of something very tasty, food, or for the squeaky ball orientated dogs or whatever, a squeaky ball shoved into my fist. So the dog goes out, it comes back, and it has to make the choice. This is shaping. And the choice is touch the open hand, ignore this hand. So this might be something you would do with him, Susan, so that he's making the correct choice and being rewarded for it. So as soon as he touched this hand, I would click and then give him whatever it is from here. And it doesn't matter whether you throw it away or, just give it to him. It really doesn't matter. The click point is what matters. So this is something I would do a lot. And then, particularly with a dog that's easily distracted or very foodie, if this is food, then I would start moving it. So first point is, I guess, does the dog nose target here? Do it for a bit of duration. That would be the second criteria. The third criteria would be I'd be looking at the dog's eyes. Are they focused here or are they focused here? I'd want them to be focused obviously on this hand, not here. So I'm keeping the whole dog straight, eyes and body here. Then once you've got that, you can start moving the distraction around. Am I still on the camera? No, I am now. You can start moving the distraction around, even underneath, so that the dog learns to focus, eyes, nose, the lot here, and ignores the distraction. Obviously, little bits. So for a very easily distracted dog, and I guess Obi might be one of those dogs, I might only be able to do that or that to begin with. I might not be able to do loads of this, but you'll get there if you just take it slowly. So these kind of distraction exercises are really good because later on you can, the favourite one that I did for demos a lot with Gertie was, because she's football obsessed, so her favourite one is, can you target here or can you do heel work while I football around? And the reward is obviously getting the football. So it's whatever the dog likes again. But you can start to add in other distractions, the whippet stick. You could be moving it around as the dog's still focused on your hand or leg, whatever stage you're at. So that might help with the foodie dogs. Hello Marie, hello Sally. I'll just move down. Obviously my eyesight's not as good as I think. You might want, I don't know, if the concrete's light coloured, chunks of liver. A ball would drive him crazy. Ball shoved into your hand, and just these little squeaky balls that you can make nothing. They sell in the supermarkets and they last 2 seconds. Right in your hand, can't get it. Let him mug. He can mug all he likes, but he just doesn't get it until he's here. And, if you only do a 3-minute session of that and he only does it twice, I would be really happy with that as a start. How to get him to go away, yes, okay. That's the subject for tribal tomorrow. Okay, so now to find where I was. Cavaletti was where I was. So I've tagged this into Foundations in Body Awareness, and one of the reasons I've included it is because I want to highlight that not all dogs do heel work. We all admire the dog with a pretty high stepping. Not every dog can do that. Maddie couldn't do that, and she still managed to win crofts 3 times because she was barrel ribbed and she moved like a, I don't know, like a staffy, really, not like a beardy. There was no way that she would be able to lift her feet like that because she was far too barrel ribbed. So looking at the dog and realizing what's possible, I always wanted a dog that goose stepped. I've seen a few nice obedience dogs that have this lovely almost goose step action. But I've never had a dog that could do that. Dinky slightly, but she doesn't sustain it very well. Cavaletti is a really nice way to introduce the nicest movement you can get. It's also quite motivating. Basically, for those of you who aren't aware of what Cavaletti is, it's done with horses to teach dressage movement. And it's very difficult to describe on a video, much easier to describe in reality. But the idea is you're teaching the dog, and again it's body awareness, to lift its feet over a series of poles. In the early stages, you may have to lure the dog a little bit just till it gets the idea and limit the number of poles. Keep them far apart, keep them flat on the ground, don't raise the height too quickly. Just play with that. Very quickly, I would work on the dog moving forward on its own, because you can turn this into a really nice trick for heel work music, like walk on stand or something like that. Cavaletti. Yeah, so you're encouraging the dog to move forward on its own very, very quickly without you. And by doing that, the other thing in terms of heel work rather than freestyle is that you can look at the dog's movement without having to be, there helping the dog move. Because if you're there, you can't really see the dog's movement. If you can't see the dog's movement, you can't decide how quickly to increase the height, how close to bring the poles, and you can't see how the dog's coping with what you've put out. So in the early stages, it is just luring, but look ahead to what you do. So with a lot of dogs, you'll be able to teach high stepping very easily with that. Initially, keep your tracks on straight lines, and later on, I'm going to talk about patterns later on, but later on you can use circles and S shapes. So the dog really has to think about what it's doing with its feet. Any questions about Cavaletti? Safe treating. Yeah, treat and train. Yeah, they're really good. I've got one. I think they used to be called manners minders. Yeah, they're really good for distance. Really good. Just a place to go and reward the dog. And actually, the dog like obviously very high. From what I know about him, you could use it on a mat to get him just to go away and chill for a wee while you think about what your next step will be. Oh, hang on a second, I'm getting some strange message I'm just going to get rid of. Okay. I've said Cavaletti for driving style. Yeah. We could talk a lot about body awareness. I mean, I've been doing body awareness for about 15 years, and I've done 6 different courses that go over 4 to 6 weeks. So there's a whole host you could do, there's a whole host you can talk about, but I would never underestimate it in getting a good foundation for heel work. And I've picked out the things I think are most useful, i.e. the pivoting and the Cavaletti as the most useful. Okay, anything I should say about hand targeting before I move on? I've mentioned the distraction, I've said that already. It was next in my list. Are we still connected? Because I seem to have disappeared. Ta-da, hello? Check my connection. No, hello? Are we still there? Shall I keep talking? Hello? Can someone tell me if they can still hear me? Hello? Keep talking. I can't see me. I don't know why. I don't need to see me. It's a bit annoying. Um, it's now telling me it's having trouble with the video. Can someone tell me if I'm still there? Ah. Right, I'm going to keep talking if I'm still connected. Am I? Oh, good. I don't know whether I've been and gone or I'm back. It just keeps saying I'm having. Sorry, me and technology. The page is asking to confirm if I want to leave. No, I don't want to leave. Stay on page. Ah. Okay, I'll keep talking. I can't see me, and I don't know if you can, because it just keeps flashing up. Okay, so now we've got this hand target. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be on this. We've been doing this, but I now want to start doing this. And I've mentioned one of the ways I would do that, which is send the dog away, come back and target. But it's quite acceptable just to go from stand to hand target with the hand parallel with the floor. You've already taught the stand because we've mentioned stand, and I would put stand on cue, and I would be looking statically anyway with my hand like this in order to get the dog's head to the height I want it at. This is where I have, hi Angela, good. I hope you can see my hands in the right place. I would be looking for where I wanted the dog's head to be. So it's relatively easy with most dogs, but if you've got a really tall dog, Bosie's probably the tallest dog I've ever had, and because my hips are rather larger than they should be, I've messed around a lot with his head to get it into a position where his shoulders also connect with my leg. That it was also difficult at the other extreme with a small dog. So with Dinky, having her shoulder in the correct position, that I could firstly move my feet, and also so that she had that contact with me, so that when I removed my hands, if you do working trials or Heelwork to music, the dog's not always going to be following the hand on your hip like they do in obedience in the UK. It's going to be working. The contact's important for that, I think. So moving on to, we've got the hand in this position. We're going to start to think about moving, and I'm thinking of moving before I'm even thinking about static, and the reason I'm doing that is because static's kind of boring for the dog. Moving's far more exciting. So the out is the next thing I'm teaching. So that is where, I have no idea whether I'm on this film, I'm taking my hand right out from my body, straight out, and I'm still using this, but I'm moving my hands that way and out. So the dog's going to be following out there. It's nowhere near my leg. I'm still not using my Heelwork commands, close, side, whatever it is you say. I'm still saying touch. So the dog's expected to touch when I move. I don't say follow. One word's enough, and that one word's touch. So I start initially on straight lines. And the reason I start on straight lines is because I can look at what the dog's head's doing. So I can use twist. I didn't mention teaching twists and turns, but it's just another basic left turn, right turn in little circles that you can use. And I can use those little left and right turns to get the dog's position parallel with my body, and its head straight. So if the dog was on my right hand side, Heelwork to music now, not obedience, and the dog's head was heading out to the right, I would turn the dog to his left to straighten the dog up. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I can use those little turns on the dog on the out to get the dog moving nicely, because we've taught it on the cavaletti, and also moving in a parallel line with me. And I can see you're all saying you can hear me. Is anyone asking questions? Can you hear me still here? When I have my hand in that position with Walter, a huge beardy bounce, what can I do? Good question. Okay, you can, I know Walter, so one of the things you can do, particularly with it, he's full of beans and he bounces like any beardy I've ever known. One thing you can do is have your hand on the out, and this is where you teach a smart lure. So the dog's nose, I hope you can see this, the dog's nose is on your hand. Can you lift your hand above and he stays down? If he comes up, ignore him, just come back down. If you lift your hand up and he bounces up, ignore him, come back down. And I would be persistent with that till I could lift my hand and go down and feed him. And lift my hand and go down and feed him. You can then do that on the move. I would do it statically with a dog like Walter because I know he's a wild child. I would do it statically and then I would start doing it on the move. Does that make sense? But definitely statically with a very energetic dog. With a less energetic dog, I would definitely do it on the move. And again, that's a really smart lure, being able to move your hand off the dog's nose, a really useful skill to teach, because if you're small dog, when you start to lift your hand up to your leg, it has to stay down. If the dog bounces while I'm on the move, I always stop and come back and go back to, can I do this? And can I come back and feed you without you bouncing up? So going static, taking a little heat and energy out of the whole situation is probably the way to go. And with the little dogs, my God, you really need to do that. But you need to do it with the big dogs too, because if you think about when you put the dog onto your leg, you need to be able to go from that touch and lift your hand and flatten your hand onto your leg. Does that work? I think, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing with my hands. I'm flatting away here, but all I see is, sorry, we're having trouble with the video. Okay, so where were we? The out and the follow and bouncing up, yeah, dead common problem, probably the most common problem. Oh, got another. Yeah, but he literally nudges my hand up to my head height. He's not that bad. Go static and don't lift your hand too much. It's really about small, slow movements with a dog like him, or any dog that's got oodles of energy. Small and slow, and keeping everything very calm. Because he's a dog you don't need to teach energy to. He's got energy. He's got drive. So you need to keep calm with him. Okay, I'm going to move on. So we've got this, where did I get to? We've got the dog standing, we've taught left and right little spins so that we can straighten the dog up. Now it's really time to think about moving. And as I said, initially in straight lines, so can the dog actually just follow in a straight line? I'm not asking for left turns, right turns or anything. It's just a straight line. And I might twist the dog and put the dog onto the other side and do the same thing. You can really play about with it and have a lot of fun with it. Then I'd be thinking about, earlier on I mentioned patterns. I'd be thinking about patterns. It's probably time for me to ask you a question. Shouldn't I? I'm just checking where we are. Okay. Yes, lol, Marie. Patterns. If I have my dog on my left hand side and I go in a clockwise circle, am I teaching the dog, what am I teaching the dog to do? Is that a silly question? Should I be more specific? Yes, I should be more specific. I'm looking to say who's working harder, me or the dog? That's the question. Any answers? So I'm got my dog on the out on my left hand side and we're both going in circles that are clockwise. Who's working hardest, me or the dog? Are we still here? I may be speaking to myself now. Okay, I can't see you and I can't see me. I'm going to answer the question. What I'm doing when I do that is I'm teaching the dog to be drivey. So big circles, as big as you can, dog on the left, and keep those circles big and teach your dog to drive. What I usually do then is I spiral in, and when I get into the middle, I mean, I might not do it in the first session. I'd work over time on spiraling in. There's less drive, and it's more about turn to the right, turn to the right. Can I stop? So it's a little bit back to the pivoting that I talked about earlier. Yes, clockwise me, Angela. Oh, I'm glad you're still hearing me, Marilyn. Yes, driving, Susie. Yay. Driving. So that driving leads to when you can spiral in, yeah, just a little bit of right turn, and obviously if you do it on your right hand side, it's the other. It's what would you say? We don't have a word for in Heelwork music. It's just being on the right hand side and turning to your left. Yes, I'm terrible at left and right. So circling. On the left hand side going clockwise, on the left hand side and going anti-clockwise. What are we doing there? Oop. Nope. I think that one's the hardest one, when the dog's on the left hand side and going anti-clockwise. Or you can reverse it for those of you who do Heelwork music with the dog on your right. I think it's harder for the dog. What the dog needs to have there as a skill set is collection. I'm not sure what collection means. Give us a description of collection. What we're doing there is we're teaching the dog to control its bottom, particularly when you spiral in. The dog has to, loads of dogs, particularly drivey dogs will zoom forward, particularly as the circle gets smaller, which is why you want to start in a big circle. Always generate as much success for the dog as you can possibly generate. But as your circle gets smaller, very, very keen dogs, and these tend to be the dogs that would work forward in Heelwork anyway, will start pushing. They'll be ahead of you, and the inclination for the handler is to bring the hand backwards on that one, and the dog tends to drive further forward. So what? That's funny, Angela. Yes. Okay, his bum comes out. If his bum comes out on the right hand circles, go back to pivoting and have a look at that and make your circles as bigger. I train in a field, so big's never a problem. If you train inside and knowing the hole you train at, if it's the same one, then it's quite small I would be looking to make bigger circles. Time to don the waterproofs if it's a day like here today. And Rena, driving from behind is collection. Okay, right, I've never heard that before. That's a new one for me. So yeah, usually, apart from Angela, lucky Angela, that one with the dog going on the left on the anti-clockwise circle is usually harder, particularly for the drivey dogs. And you then want to look at the kind of dog you have and what you want. If my dog wasn't the most motivated dog, then I would do less of the anti-clockwise circles to begin with, and more of the kind of drivey ones to try and drive the dog forward a little bit more. Yeah, a field. Everybody needs a field. I've just moved and I'm looking for a field. Okay, so patterns I've talked a little bit about. We could talk about other patterns. I mean, I train in serpentines a lot. There are a host of patterns that we could go on about, but I think the circles are the big ones. because you'll get so much out of them, and it's worth investing a lot of time in. Um, statics are the bit the dogs are usually, oh, it's a bit boring. So static is where you've got the dog on your leg and you're teaching the dog to turn. So it might be right turn, left turn, it might be about turn, it might be left about turn. And obviously you're not going to do, well, I wouldn't do all of those turns. I don't mean all together. I wouldn't do a complete left turn in the first go. I might do a tiny little, I mean, one of my favourite things is sidestepping, because in those early stages statics, you want the dog's contact on your leg to be solid before you start doing all kinds of other turns. So tiny little side steps, very, very tiny. Don't do great big side steps, literally just tiny little shuffles. So the dogs, what you don't want is you move, the dog moves, you move, the dog moves. You want you move, the dog moves, you move, the dog moves. Da, 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 da. So it's much closer, almost not to the point that the dog's leaning on you. You really don't want to go there. If the dog's leaning on you, then I would stop sidestepping for a while and start doing left turns, right turns. And making them small. You can break these up. So they don't have to be a complete left turn, a complete right turn. They can just be sections of that. And these sections of that, you can generate some really nice, I don't really dance, but I kind of make it up as I go along, dance steps for Heelwork music. If you play with, you know, perhaps a slight left turn followed by a slight right turn, slight left turn followed by a slight right turn. So it's not a complete left turn. Does that make sense? So hard to explain and not do. So statics are the last thing I'd be thinking about, because you've already worked on it and so many of the steps that have gone before. I mean, the dog's already got an idea of it. You like it banging onto your leg in a pivot, so it's going to have a really good idea that, yeah, banging on your leg's a good idea. So yeah, I can sidestep and I can start to turn left and right. Initially I'd still be doing them on this hand, so I'm playing with it really. So I'm not saying close and left or anything. I'm just saying touch and seeing if the dog's responsive to my leg. So initially to this, and then, as I said before, dog's nose is probably going to be about there, and you turn and the dog turns. But eventually you want to do that and still do your statics, so your hand's flat on your leg and the dog's nose is underneath but not on your hand. Does that make sense? So statics, not very exciting for the dog, so I would never do more than a few minutes at a time and do running, moving, exciting stuff, then go back to the statics, because they're not the most interesting for the dog. Have we got any more questions? No, I don't do loads of statics. If I have, I'm not talking about a dog just learning, but I think your dog's older. If I was going out to train mine and I had like perhaps 10 minutes per dog, then I would probably be doing about 2 or 3 minutes static compared to. I do occasionally video my training, and definitely I'm doing about 50% training and 50% play and rewarding, whatever it is we're doing, depending on the dog. So you can imagine how little is static. I definitely know 3 minutes at a time. But then I like tiny little sections of training, like 10 minutes is long enough. You want to always, start with something exciting. Back to my teaching experience, start with a known, finish with something very rewarding. So start with something the dog loves to do, might be a run or a food run or something exciting. Then start to work on the more new or more difficult aspects of training, do something exciting, so you always leave the dog wanting more. If you've been doing something fiddly at the end of your training session, you're probably not leaving the dog wanting more. you're probably leaving the dog going, whoa, that was hard work. You know, I had to think about that. So always leave the dog on a known and exciting exercise, not statics. So yeah, I don't do loads of statics because the dogs like, um, okay, I'm running out of time, I know, and I'm looking at the whole picture. I've kind of alluded to the whole picture. So I've done a variety of different things to bring all these things together. So what I usually start to step in towards the dog on the move. And so the dog's shoulder starts to rest on my leg. I'm still keeping my hand in this position, even though it's on my but I'd probably be stopping and rewarding. If it's the first time you do it, bring the dog onto your leg, stop and reward straight away, and then add in a bit of duration, and then it's back to this flatten your hand onto your leg. At that point is where I would add the word close, heel, whatever it is you would say. Um, you're welcome. So you're not adding the cue until the dog has the behaviour. Um, does that? So I could say loads more about bringing it together, but the main thing is, because I know I'm running out of time, I think I've got 3 minutes left. Stepping into that, into your dog. So I usually use the lines on the football pitch we sometimes train on. So I can keep the dog on the line, and it's me that's stepping into that line and into the dog. Otherwise, God knows where we'd be. So the dog's still moving in a straight line. Keep that straight line. Never encourage the heads to come round, or because if the head comes round, the bottom comes out, and you don't want that. The other thing I'll say before I finish is, because this is like a force-free forum, I'm doing all this not on the lead. I never have the dog on the lead because you can interfere. My dogs have always been starting novice in obedience. They've always been better off the lead than on the lead, probably because I don't spend any time with them on the lead teaching heel work. But the important thing is that, nervous handlers, I've seen it, they're inclined to tighten their lead, and they don't mean it. It's just anxiety about being in the ring, especially if they're inexperienced. But I have a real hatred of those that, well, not the people, but the action of popping dogs on leads to keep the head up. If your dog can't keep its head up, then you haven't taught it to keep its head up, and no amount of random popping on the lead is going to teach the dog to do that, and it's just unkind. So it's better to teach off lead. This is a force-free. Everything I've told you is done with force-free and no coercion. If there's any questions, we've got about a minute left. I'm happy to answer any. Have I missed anybody? No, I don't think so. Well, I hope you've enjoyed heel work. I could talk for so long. I've tried to cram from beginning to heel work into an hour. It's probably not as easy as that. We're back tomorrow to talk about tray ball and ethics if you join us at 1 and 2 o'clock. And happy healing. Bye.